Now I have everything I need. The user wants a 2,900-word script, no headings, following the framework style. Let me write it. Now I have a thorough understanding of the framework. Let me write the 2,900-word script. Marcus Delaney had been dreading this blind date since his sister Renee left the post-it note on his refrigerator 3 weeks ago. The name on it meant nothing to him. The restaurant meant nothing. What meant something was the particular Tuesday evening it was scheduled for, November 14th, which was the same evening he had 41 jobs to finish quoting, a school pickup to arrange, and a $47,000 insurance gap between what he had in savings and what the county said he owed in back property taxes on the shop his father had built with his own hands in 1978. He had 14 days left before they sent the second notice. After the second notice, they sent a lien. He did not have time for dinner with a stranger who would look at his calloused hands and his truck and his flannel jacket and conclude she already knew everything there was to know about him. He was thinking about all of this when his phone buzzed at 6:08 p.m. on Route 9 heading east. And he looked at it for exactly 1 second before his eyes went back to the road, and in that 1 second, he missed the silver Lexus, sitting dead in the right lane with its hazard lights blinking orange through the November rain. He did not miss the woman standing beside it. She was already soaked. Her dark coat turned nearly black by the rain. Her phone pressed to her ear with one hand, and her other hand raised in a gesture that was somewhere between flagging him down and waving him away. He did not need to be waved down. He was already pulling over. She had not yet seen his face. She had seen his truck. Alina Vasquez had been running 4 minutes late for her blind date since she left the office, which was the first time she had been late to anything in 11 years. She had not intended to agree to the setup. Her assistant Petra had agreed on her behalf, citing the fact that Alana had not eaten a meal outside of a board meeting or a client dinner in 3 years, and Alana had looked at the calendar invite and thought about arguing, and then simply hadn't. She was the CEO of Vasquez Capital, which had just completed its acquisition of a mid-sized energy infrastructure firm that morning, and she had sat in that boardroom at 6 a.m. and taken apart the opposing counsel's position, clause by clause, until there was nothing left of it, and everyone at the table understood that the deal was done. She had done this in a white blouse she would not get to change before dinner. She was standing in the rain in it now. The truck that pulled over was a 2009 Ford F-250, with a rust patch above the right rear wheel well and a back bed covered by a faded canvas tarp. The man who got out was tall, wearing a green flannel, open over a gray thermal, his dark hair wet in approximately 4 seconds. He didn't run. He walked at the same pace he would have used if it wasn't raining at all. And when he reached her car, he went directly to the front left tire and crouched down and looked at it without asking her anything first. "Blowout," she said. I called roadside assistance. They said 45 minutes. He didn't answer. He pressed his palm flat against the sidewall of the tire, then moved his hand around the inner edge where the wheel met the asphalt. And then he stood up and looked at the wheel well for a moment and said, "It's not the tire." "It absolutely blew out," she said. "I heard it. The tire blew because the lower control arm gave," he said. "You had a front suspension failure. The tire was the symptom." He pointed at a spot underneath the frame she couldn't see from where she was standing. "Left front control arm bushing. You've probably been feeling a pull on highway speeds for a few months. Slight drift right when you brake hard." She had. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. "If you'd driven another 8 miles at speed," he said, "you would have lost the wheel." She looked at him then. His eyes were already back on the undercarriage. "You can tell all of that," she said, and stopped, because she hadn't intended to finish the sentence out loud. "I can see it," he said, as if this were a perfectly normal answer to the question she hadn't finished asking. She canceled the roadside assistance call. He had already retrieved a hydraulic floor jack from the bed of his truck and was positioning it under the frame's jack point, with a precision that told her he had done this particular motion approximately 10,000 times. He did not make conversation while he worked. He did not fill silence. She found this both irritating and unexpectedly settling, which she could not explain, and therefore did not try. That was when she noticed the small face watching her from the passenger window of the truck. The girl was maybe 7. She had dark curls pressed flat on one side from sleeping, and she was holding a stuffed crow that was missing its beak, and she was watching Elena with the particular unguarded curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't looking. Elena raised one hand in a small wave. The girl did not wave back. She considered Elena for another moment, and then rolled down the window. He already knew it was the control arm before he got out of the truck, she said. He just wanted to look at it to make sure. Elena glanced at him. He had not looked up. How do you know that? Elena asked. Because he went straight to the front left, the girl said. If he thought it was just a flat, he would have checked all 4 first. He always checks the one he's already sure about. She tilted her head slightly. He says you can learn more from what you're right about than what you're wrong about. I don't know if that's true. I think you can learn more from what you're wrong about. The crow was missing its beak because, Elena would learn later, the girl had traded it to a boy in her class who had broken his grandmother's reading glasses, because she'd decided his guilt was heavier than her crow's beak, and someone had to make the math even. The girl's name was Zoe. She was 7 years and 4 months old. She had her father's eyes and her mother's seriousness, and she had been carrying the beakless crow since the week after her mother's accident. Not because she was sad, but because she said it reminded her that things could still fly even after they lost something. Elena didn't know any of this yet. She stood in the rain and felt, for half a second, that she had said the wrong thing to this child, and that the child was too kind to correct her, which was disorienting, because Elena had not worried about saying the wrong thing in a social situation in a very long time. Marcus looked up from the control arm then. He looked at his daughter. He looked back at the car. She needs a tow, he said. There's a shop on Clement that can have the part by morning. I can call them. You don't have to do that, Elena said. I know, he said. He was already calling. It was while he was on the phone with the shop that the black Mercedes pulled up behind them, and the man who got out was wearing a coat that cost more than Marcus's monthly revenue estimate, and he walked directly to Elena without looking at Marcus at all. His name was Theodore Marsh. He was senior partner at Marsh Wayland, which handled Vasquez Capital's legal affairs. He had arrived at their dinner reservation 45 minutes ago. He had called Alana twice. He had spent 11 years of dinners and benefit galas positioning himself as indispensable to Alana's world. And tonight specifically, he had a proposal he'd been building toward for 3 of those years. And it involved a contract restructuring that would give Marsh Wayland primary governance rights over Vasquez Capital's acquisition portfolio in exchange for a reduced legal fee he intended to. Present as generosity, he looked at Marcus the way certain men look at anything they have already decided is not worth their attention. Elena, he said, there are people from my firm waiting at Cipriani's. This is... He gestured at the truck, the rain, Marcus, without completing the gesture. We can get you a car. Marcus was still on the phone. He had not looked up. Mr. Marsh, Marcus said. He said it to the undercarriage of the car, not as a greeting, just as a word. Theodore went still. I'm sorry, Theodore said. Do I know you? Marcus ended his phone call. He stood up. He was not angry. His voice was the same temperature it had been when he was talking about control arm bushings. "You handled the Brennan Park filing in 2019, Marcus said. The environmental remediation contract, the one where the soil report got revised between the first and second submission." Theodore's cufflinks caught the rain. "The Cayman account that received the 3 payments between March and September of that year is registered under the name Marsh Consulting Group," Marcus said. "The authorization signatures on the disbursement orders match your firm's senior partner code. The EPA has an active inquiry file on the Brennan Park site that has been waiting for someone to connect it to those disbursement records for 4 years." Theodore said nothing. "The tow's coming at 7:15, Marcus said to Elena. He crouched back down under the car. "You can wait in the truck if you're cold." Theodore Marsh straightened his left cuff, then his right. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He walked back to the Mercedes at the same pace he had arrived. The engine started. The car moved. He did not look back. His cuffs, Elena noticed, had stayed straight. He had not touched them again. The gesture was simply gone, like a habit belonging to a man who no longer existed. Elena stood in the rain for a long moment after his taillights disappeared. "What was that?" she finally said. "Control arm bushing costs about $340 installed," Marcus said. "Shop on Clement will give you a fair price." She looked at him. He was examining the brake line, not looking at her. Zoe had fallen back asleep in the front seat of the truck, the beakless crow tucked under her chin. Elena started investigating on Wednesday, not because she doubted what she'd heard. She had heard enough of it in boardrooms to know the sound of real information, but because she had built her entire career on not accepting things she hadn't verified herself. She pulled the Brennan Park file by end of day. She had her research team pull the EPA inquiry records by Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, she had the disbursement authorizations, and when she laid them next to the Marsh-Wayland billing codes she had always signed off on without examining, the shape of what she was looking at was very clear. Marsh-Wayland had been running a remediation contracting fraud for 6 years. 2 of those years, the liability flow had been structured in a way that ran directly through Vasquez Capital's acquisition agreements. Elena had signed 3 of those agreements. She had not known what was inside them. Her father, who had founded the firm and brought Marsh in before his death, had trusted Theodore Marsh with a category of legal work he'd kept separate from everything else. Elena had inherited that trust, without inheriting the knowledge. She called Marcus on Friday. She didn't ask him how he knew. She asked him to show her where it had started. He took her to Brennan Park on a Saturday morning when the November sky had turned from gray to something close to white, and they stood at the chain-link fence at the east corner where the contaminated soil ran closest to the residential boundary. The fence had a small memorial zip tied to it. 2 photographs inside a plastic sleeve. A woman. A child who looked like the woman. Marcus stood next to Elena and looked at the photographs for a moment without speaking. "My wife was the project engineer on the remediation," he said. "She found the discrepancy in the soil report. She documented it. She filed an internal report with the contracting firm." He paused. She was driving home from a meeting where she'd been told the report was being revised when the accident happened. The road conditions were listed as a factor. The meeting wasn't listed at all. Elena did not say anything. "I didn't know Marsh-Wayland was involved until about 18 months after," he said. "By then I had a 4-year-old who needed to eat, and a shop I was trying to hold together, and a 14-day notice on back taxes." He looked at his hands. "I've been building the file for 3 years. I was waiting for someone with enough standing to make the referral mean something." Elena turned and looked at him. He was still looking at the photographs. She had categorized him 6 days ago by his truck and his flannel and his calloused hands, and assigned him a value. She had been wrong in every direction a person could be wrong, not just about what he was, about what she had been carrying without knowing she was carrying it. Her name was on 3 of those agreements. Her father had trusted the wrong man and left her that trust as an inheritance. She had signed her name to documents that had helped shield the people responsible for the calculation that had put a woman in a car on a wet road on a November night and not listed the meeting as a factor. She stood in the cold and said nothing, and Marcus did not fill the silence, and after a long time she said, "I have a securities attorney who has been waiting 4 years to file something he could actually win." "I know," Marcus said. "I know who she is." The referral went to the SEC and the EPA simultaneously on the Monday before Thanksgiving. Theodore Marsh received the notice that his firm's authorization codes had been formally submitted to federal investigators at 10:47 a.m. He was in a conference room on the 41st floor with 4 of his partners when the call came. Alina's securities attorney walked into that same conference room at 11:15 a.m. with 2 federal investigators and a document package that had been 3 years in the building. Theodore looked at the package and then at Alina's attorney and then at the door, and the door was already shut, and the 2 investigators were already seated, and the Cayman account that was registered under his mother's name was the first item on the first page. He reached for his cuffs. He straightened the left one. He put his hand back in his lap and did not reach for the right one. He said one thing, which was that his attorneys would need to review the submission before any response was possible. The federal investigators said that his attorneys were already aware of the submission and that the review window was noted in the attached schedule. Theodore said nothing after that. He did not look at the door again. The property tax lien against the shop was resolved the same week, through a mechanism Alina did not explain and Marcus did not ask her to explain. The 14-day clock on the second notice simply stopped. 1 year later, Zoe was in 2nd grade at Clement Elementary and had recently traded the beakless crow to a 3rd grader who had lost her library book and needed something to balance the weight of that. And she had replaced it with a small brass compass that her father had given her, which had belonged to her mother. And she had decided it always pointed home, because that was where her mother would have wanted it to go. She was explaining this theory to Alina on a Sunday afternoon in the kitchen, while the soup that Alina had made, badly but with full commitment, was doing something unpromising on the stove. Marcus came inside from the shop and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the 2 of them. Zoe said she put too much rosemary in again. "I know," he said. Alina did not look at him. She looked at the compass in Zoe's hand instead, and she was quiet for a moment, and Zoe watched her the way she watched most things, which was without any pretense of not watching. Marcus walked to the stove and adjusted the heat and didn't say anything else. His hand rested on the counter near Alina's, and neither of them moved. And Zoe noted this with the same careful precision she used to note everything, and went back to explaining her compass theory. Some people spend years building walls so nothing can reach them, only to discover that what finally came through wasn't a force strong enough to break the wall. It was someone patient enough to wait beside the door until they opened it themselves. If you know someone who has been standing outside their own life, waiting for permission to come back in, share this with them. Subscribe for stories like this one every week. And tell us this, because we really want to know if you had spent years building something to protect yourself, and the person who finally made you feel safe was a stranger who'd had every reason to walk away. Would you have let them in? Or would you have found one more reason to keep the door closed? We read every one.